Welcome back to the never-ending video series on Portugal. We start the episode driving from Lisbon to Sintra, which was built in 1854, I think anyway, the Castle of Pina, which is what we visited, which disappointingly was not as old as I had thought. From Sintra we drove down to the Algarve, where we fought through the masses of British beachgoers to see some of the most spectacular scenery I've seen in Europe, and go on some of the most beautiful hikes I've ever done. Unfortunately, we left for the hike midday, which means that the heat was the worst part of the hike, but the bounty of beaches and really inviting water to swim in really helped cool off, but added a lot of time to the hikes. Hiking at midday made for some pretty boring light, so threw in some Velvia and some Hectare for good measure and to cover all bases. After Carvoeria, we headed to the city of Lagos, which was not very far away and was a fine city, but definitely felt underwhelming compared to the beauty of the nature there. It was really something else. Be prepared to book some tickets down to the south of Portugal, because it is one of the most beautiful, unique places in Europe that I think everyone has to visit. Took the bus up to the Castle of Pina, which was not too long a bus journey and way better than the hike because we didn't have that much time and it was very uphill. We arrived fairly early at the castle and were greeted by a massive queue, so we spent a while queuing and then realised our car was probably going to run out on the meter, so we just walked around on the outside instead. Apparently the inside's not that spectacular anyway, and the outside is pretty awesome to walk around and very interesting. I shot these on my Pentax 645 and Fuji Pro 400H, I think. And I think I liked how it rendered the colours, but these buildings definitely need a new coat of paint. They are pretty worn, as you can see. I like the corners of these. I think it's almost minimalist and quite like just seeing part of the building. The only inside part we managed to go to was the chapel, with this absolutely beautiful stained glass window, which is super detailed and saturated. Here's a view from the top of the castle, where you can see out onto Sintra, and there's another fortress there on the hill, which is apparently meant to be really good to visit. Heading out of Lisbon, we went over the Ponte Vasco da Gama. I'm pretty sure I butchered that, but it was 17 kilometers long and was the longest bridge in Europe, and is the longest bridge in Portugal, which was pretty impressive. Driving to the Algarve, the landscape was pretty changing and quite beautiful for not the longest drive, only 3 hours, but it did change quite a bit. We made it down to the Algarve and to the town of Koraveria. I'm pretty sure I've mispronounced that as well. But we spent the afternoon on the boardwalk, which is a pretty beautiful boardwalk actually, and I think quite famous for the area, but fairly quiet surprisingly, as most people are at the beach. And if you miss this part, you definitely missed the best part of the town. I finished off the colour mission roll here, and I really like the colours that it gave. Again, really light, airy and film-like. Recommend this film a lot. Now you can enjoy a little montage of us exploring the caves around the area. Changed out the colour mission after finishing that to some Velvia 100 to get some saturated colours and try catch some of the sunset. We had a quick beer before admiring the sunset, which was not actually that crowded on this boardwalk considering how crowded the town was. I don't know what everyone else is doing in town, but they're definitely missing out on this. After hydrating with some coconut water, we swiftly moved on to some of the best named beer I've ever seen, but it was a tiny little bottle. I like the way the Velvia is really contrasty and the blacks are quite black. I think it captured sunset quite well. They weren't great photos, but it was a relaxing area, and I think the sky turned out pretty nicely. And you can see how contrasty that Velvia is there, which I quite like, and how quiet the boardwalk is. It's just after sunset, the last are light, managed to capture a few portraits of Piper, which I really like. Then we headed to a nice tapas restaurant where I had forgot money, so after an embarrassing conversation, they let me pay the next day. On the walk home, also saw this, which I thought I'd capture really quick. Headed to the Seven Hanging Valleys Trail the next day, where, as you can see, the start is absolutely beautiful, and I think this was rated one of the best beaches in the world at some point, which I can completely get behind. It also wasn't overly crowded. Shot some Velvia, which did not really do it justice because it was midday, and I swiftly moved to some black and white, which I think captured it a lot better than the colour as well. As you can see here, some adventurous people managed to get to the very edge of the rocks, and there's a lot of signs which are warnings because that rock's pretty soft and it's pretty prone to crumbling, I believe. So yeah, rather than me, but made for a good photo I think with them on top of the rock. We were stopping every 5 minutes on the hike just because everything was so scenic and picturesque that I wanted to capture it all, and captured just a few portraits down here, more environmental portraits I guess, but I quite like how they turned out. They're not really posed, pretty casual. Past this man who had set up his little chair and relaxing area here. I'm not sure if he was fishing, but definitely a seasoned expert because he's brought his own umbrella and you needed it in that heat. It was roasting, and I really like these photos of that white umbrella. This I believe was the Benegil Caves, which we didn't actually do because it was so busy and the queue was so long, didn't want to wait in the heat, and swiftly moved on to a quieter location and quieter beach to go for a dip. Get charged 30 to 3. Here's Piper shooting some Portra 400. I've managed to switch on to some film. This might be one of my favourite photos from using the Velvia. Just the detail there is really nice for 35mm. and that lighthouse is super picturesque, and this whole scenery is just amazing. So I took loads of photos of it, as you can imagine. Shoot it in black and white a bit, but they weren't great. I think the colour here really needs to shine through, so I used some Ektar, and I also shot it on Velvia obviously, but I really like the Ektar results. I just think Ektar's great for midday, and here you can really see where it shines. This is by far my favourite shot of the lighthouse. I love the reds on Ektar, always really punchy, and I think the detail's really great.
La vie est belle. Life is beautiful.
We arrived in Lagos to be greeted by some of the best graffiti I think I've ever seen. I really liked it. Simple but really cool. It was really windy here, but truly nothing of what was to come in the next few days in Sagres. Another great lighthouse. This one was a bit trickier to photograph, so I didn't take any of this, but at sunset I took a few shots of the surrounding area, I think on Ektar 100, and these are some of my favourite shots of the trip, I think, just as the sun's setting, like cutting through the rocks, and the kind of airy, light look to them all, I really enjoyed. And then headed into town to finish the night with more wine. The following day we had to leave quite early, so we went on a quick boat tour, which was a great way to finish Lagos, seeing the beaches from a different angle and really just exploring the area. It was really nice and not too long, but you got to see some unique views that you wouldn't from land. Pipe was the only one to take a camera. I wasn't brave enough. Kind of thought it might be a bit more of an adventurous boat tour, but it was pretty calm. After seeing enough caves to satisfy even the most intense geographer, we then headed back to land swiftly, where we drove on to Sagres for next week's video.